Hi, this is Maggie. In this video we're going to look at some of the surface transformations available in the pygame.transform library. Listing 8.8 from the book illustrates the transformations that we're going to look at. You'll notice that this listing has an event loop which processes key down events, and specifically the right arrow, the up arrow, the space bar, the M key, the S key, the left arrow, and the down arrow. Let's run the program and see how the program responds to these key presses. Okay, so here's the program, and it's this little pineapple floating in a swimming pool, and he's nice and cool. Now, if we press the up arrow, the image flips. The pineapple is now upside down, and the down arrow undoes that. Now look at which side his little cup is on, and I press the right arrow and he flips across the y-axis left to right. Pressing the left arrow flips him back. Now the M key magnifies him. He becomes much bigger, and the S key resets. In fact, the left arrow and down arrows also both reset the pineapple. Finally, if I press the space bar, he rotates by about 30 degrees. I can rotate him all the way around if I continue to press that. Let's see how this works. Now I have an image I load in from disk called coolpineapple.ping, and I load that to a surface called pineapple. But then, after I convert it, preserving the alpha channel with convert alpha, I copy that to a new variable called blit pineapple. And that's actually just a reference to the same surface object. Blit pineapple is the surface I'm going to blit to the screen, and it's the one that is going to reference all of the transformations. I want to have two surfaces, the original and the transformed surface, because the transformations will degrade my image. I don't want to replace my old surface with a transformed surface. Every time I transform, I'm going to work from my original surface. So let's look at an example of that. Let's look at the first event that's processed, which is a right arrow key, which flips the pineapple. I have pygame.transform.flip, and I pass in the surface to be flipped, and then two booleans, true and false. We'll talk about those in a minute. What pygame.transform.flip does is it takes the surface that's passed as a parameter and makes a copy, which is the surface flipped along one or two axes, and it returns that flipped surface. So it doesn't change the original surface. It returns a new surface, which is the transformed surface. I reference that new surface with the variable blit pineapple. That's the pineapple I'm always blitting to the screen. So instead of blitting the original, I will now be blitting the flipped image. But next time I do a transformation, I'm going to work from the original again so that my image doesn't degrade. So now those two booleans, you may have guessed, are which axes I want to flip the image on. The first is for the x direction, and the second is for the y direction. Here I'm flipping only in the x direction because I've passed in true for that parameter, and not the y direction because I've passed in false for that parameter. But you may have guessed, or if you're looking at the code you can see, that when I want to flip him so he's upside down, I also call pygame.transform.flip, but I pass in false for the x parameter and true for the y parameter. And that's how I get an upside down flip. And I could do both if I passed in true for both parameters. Now the next event that's handled is the spacebar, which rotates the image. I don't want to rotate an already rotated image, so I keep a separate variable which is the amount of the rotation, and I add to it every time the user presses the spacebar. So the first time they press the spacebar, rotation is set to 30, and the original image is rotated by 30 degrees. The next time they press the spacebar, we add 30 to that, getting 60, and the original image is rotated by 60 degrees. It gives the impression we're continuing to rotate, but each time I begin from the original image so I don't get degradation in the quality. And again, this returns a copy, so I store that in blit pineapple. The final transformation is scaling, pygame.transform.scale, and that takes the surface to be scaled and then a width and a height. I get the width and height from the pineapple image and multiply each by 1.5 to scale it 1.5 times. Again, that returns a surface, which is a copy, scaled, that I store in blit pineapple. To reset the pineapple, we simply copy the reference to the original image to blit pineapple. We reset in response to the S, left arrow, and down arrow keys. So the things to remember with the transformations is to keep your original image separate from the transformed images so that you are always transforming a copy that hasn't degraded. Keep track of your transformations with variables if you need to. For example, if we wanted the user to be able to flip in one axis and then flip in the other, and then rotate that doubly flipped image, I'd have to keep track of all of the transformations so I could apply them all to the original image each time the user added a new transformation. Here I'm only allowing one for simplicity, but you can see a sort of model of that with the rotation, where I keep track of the number of degrees the image has been rotated and start from the original image each time the user adds to the degrees. And remember, of course, that these transform operations return a copy of the surface that you pass as a parameter. So you must store that transformed image in a variable, and that is probably the one you want to blit. So this is, again, something that you can play with to get used to how it works. Have fun with it.